Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Bradburn, and alongside me is Logan Camden. And today we are going to be giving our predictions for the star-studded Pacific Division. We are less than a week away from the NBA season tip-off now, so we're going to just keep mowing through these last couple divisions and all of our playoff and award predictions over the rest of this week. If you've missed our previous division breakdowns, we've covered the whole Eastern Conference and the Northwest Division. That's all on our YouTube channel or across audio platforms. But Logan, today we're talking about the Pacific Division, and I can see you going a number of ways with this answer. I know that I considered multiple options. Who do you have on top of this division?
Yeah, this was a tough one to rank in order, and I would hear an argument, I think, for any team atop this division. I would obviously strongly debate you about two teams at the bottom that I think are probably the two lowest ones, but I would hear you out. I am taking the Los Angeles Lakers to win the Pacific Division, and it may be a little surprising just because the Lakers haven't been the best regular season team, and I know we've harped on that for the past two seasons, Carson, that the Lakers are traditionally always near the upper echelon of contenders in the Western Conference because of how they're constructed with two elite stars, but that hasn't necessarily translated into regular season success. So why do I think the Lakers are going to be better in this regular season? One, I'm more confident, I think, in Anthony Davis than I ever have been before. Last season was the healthiest and just the best season that Anthony Davis has had since their championship run. That was the best year of his career. But I'm more confident in him being available and being great. Like, Anthony Davis was reliable offensively last year, and that was the biggest change that I thought we saw. 25 points per game, 13 boards, nearly 4 assists a night with elite defense. I still think AD is the best defender on planet Earth, and so he gives the Lakers a very strong baseline for what they can do defensively. And he's still a really good offensive star. I'm also more confident in JJ Redick just being better than Darvin Ham. And that is a huge variable change from last year. I just think Darvin Ham sucked as a head coach. And I think the new energy that JJ Redick brings into the building, the enthusiasm, and I think JJ Redick's brilliant. And don't get me wrong, Carson, I think there's going to be some growing pains, as there always are with new coaches. You know, I think just game management, figuring out rotations. It's going to be a little bit of an adjustment, right? JJ's never done this before, so I think there's going to be some growing pains, but I don't think the bar for him being better than Darvin Ham is very high. I think he's going to clear that pretty easily. And so those are two things that I bank on the Lakers being great in the regular season. And honestly, I still think their flaws are still the same. I still think the question marks that we have about this team are the same that they've been about the past few seasons. The biggest one, how much can LeBron James exert himself in the regular season? Probably not much. We're going to be relying on Anthony Davis and the supporting cast carrying through the regular season, and then it's going to be about LeBron and how healthy he is and cranking it up a notch next, when they get into the playoffs. And then what level of a regular season defense can this team reach with such a limited backcourt, right? I think that's always going to be a part of the biggest questions. D'Lo and Austin Reeves are one of the worst defensive backcourts in basketball. They're just so physically and athletically limited. They don't rebound the ball well. They don't move well in space. And how much can Anthony Davis clean up those clean up for them on the back end? But yeah, I think they're going to be a better regular season team this year, man. I think Redick is going to keep them more focused. I think he's going to keep them more locked in. And a big part of their skid last year was just the hangover from the in-season tournament. I don't think we're going to have that kind of lull in the regular season from LA. So I think this team is very similar to the team that they've been over the past few years. LeBron James and Anthony Davis are a year older, but this is the most confident I've been in Anthony Davis in a long time of having a good regular season. And I believe so much more in JJ Redick than I do in Darvin Ham. And that is the biggest component of why I think the Lakers are going to be a better regular season team than last year.
Yeah, that's really the difference with this team. It's fundamentally the same roster, but you bring in JJ, and I've gotten higher on the JJ Redick hiring the more I've thought about it. My gut reaction was I think this is a really smart dude, but this is an exceptionally difficult circumstance to be thrown into for your first job as a coach at the NBA level, period. Forget head coach, and you have some difficult player dynamics just with having such established veteran superstars in terms of regular season effort, in terms of really having conventional authority as a head coach. And fundamentally, I just felt like this is a spot where the coach tends to be the scapegoat. Darvin Ham was bad last year, but he cost the Lakers in the regular season. I thought that his role in their playoff downfall was greatly overstated. That was really just about the Nuggets role players soundly outplaying the Lakers role players, who were disastrous. If you want to talk about a lack of regular season identity and effort after the in-season tournament, and some really questionable rotation decisions, right? Starting Cam Reddish for a stretch, and going to both Austin Reeves and D'Lo coming off the bench for a time, starting the two athlete, no offense backcourt. Like, there were things that Darvin Ham did that cost them in the regular season, but it's really, really tough to be the coach of the Los Angeles Lakers with these sort of expectations that are always going to be inflated some, right? I look at this team and I say, yes, they're going to be a solid playoff team. I think Lakers fans may still talk themselves into the expectation of, we're going to contend. We have LeBron James and Anthony Davis. We should contend. And if you fall short of that, a lot of that often falls fairly or unfairly on the head coach. But the reason I've gotten higher is I just think he's such a good offensive mind, and I really like how he has approached things so far as a communicator. I think he is establishing a good identity for this basketball team, and I think you really see that on the offensive end. This should be a pretty awesome offense. I appreciate that JJ's already bringing more organized offense to the table, right? More actual actions. They're playing true five-out basketball right now. There's more movement within this offense. JJ has put more of an emphasis on three-point volume. We're seeing a lot of stuff with ghost screens and guard-on-guard screens and guard-to-guard handoffs. Just a lot of stuff, I think, that is potentially causing defensive errors and is just really making the most of spacing and movement within this offense, because they have tremendous offensive skill. I mean, they have a super offensively skilled backcourt. Rui last year, terrible in the playoffs, but he shot 42% from deep in the regular season. He's got good feel. He cuts well. And they have LeBron and AD, who aren't just two superstars. They exert insane rim pressure. And over the second half of last season, because of that, this was a top 3 offense. For the last 45 games, they were top 3 in offensive rating, and they just added a much better offensive coach. So I do think that that will boost them a bit in the regular season, and I do like the value that JJ provides to them there. Overall, though, I'd expect them to have a pretty similar regular season record to last year. I have them winning 47 games. I think that they probably end up as the 7 seed. I have them with the same record as my 6 seed, who's also in this division, but I think that is a team that plays harder in the regular season and also can count on their stars being more available, because that's the thing. I expect the Lakers offense to be more consistently great, but also LeBron and AD missed 17 combined games last year. You can't reasonably expect that to happen again with what we've seen from LeBron in recent years, where he's missing 20-plus games consistently, and AD's entire career, he's been good to miss 20-plus games. So I think that they are due for some variance in the wrong direction there. But also on the flip side of that, the team was exceptionally disinterested post-play-in tournament, and they were generally very poorly coached. So I think those things sort of balance out. I'm not expecting the Lakers to become some enthusiastic, high-effort regular season team just because they replaced Darvin Ham with JJ Redick. I don't think that's reasonable when you have LeBron and Anthony Davis as your 2 best players for a regular season. But I am expecting more effort than last year. So you weigh that against the fact they're probably going to have worse health luck, and I think that they end up in a pretty similar spot in the regular season. Here's what I don't get about this team, though. I'm not expecting them to be some juggernaut. Again, I'm expecting them to finish in the play-in range, at least on the edge of the play-in. But I see so many people acting like this isn't a legitimate top 8 team in the West, and I just don't get that. I understand that they lost in the first round last year, and they lost in 5 games. And we can mock the fact that it was a tight 5 games, that it was a competitive gentleman's sweep after the closest sweep in NBA history, but it really was. The total point differential in that series was 11 points. And D'Angelo Russell and Rui Hachimura were both disastrous. D'Lo had a true shooting percentage of 48. Rui Hachimura gave you 8 points per game on 47% true shooting. I don't like D'Lo in a playoff setting. I think that they should move him this year for somebody who better fits in that backcourt if they can, although I think that is easier said than done. But he's obviously a better offensive player than that. Rui is a much better offensive player than that. And that's really what it came down to. Them going against the team that I still believe was the best in the West last year. They were still thoroughly competitive because they have 2 top 10 players and they both played like it in that series. They were both excellent. And that's a special weapon. And that's just a punch that very few teams can throw. It makes them a matchup nightmare for a lot of the non-true contenders, right? When you're going a level below the Thunder and the Nuggets, it's just a very scary matchup because they're dominant basketball players who exert themselves on the game physically with that consistent rim pressure, and they have complementary skill sets, right? LeBron can fill so many roles offensively. AD is going to dominate defensively. Their two-man game is elite. And AD played at an unbelievable level last year. I think that offensively, he's the best we've ever seen him. His post game is the best it's been. His touch shot making over the last 2 years has been outstanding. And so did LeBron. I mean, we saw a version of LeBron who had a huge bounce back season as a jump shooter, who was involved offensively in more ways, arguably, than ever before, right? Still a brutal bully mismatch attacker, still one of the most effective transition players in basketball, but was also a super effective catch and shooter. I mean, just such a complete offensive player, such a versatile offensive player, and still a top 10 guy. So to me, that makes the Lakers still the actual best team in this division. Forget regular season record. When it comes to the playoff punch, I think that they can throw the best one, but they're still definitely a flawed basketball team. And they didn't get meaningfully better from last year, even if I like the JJ Redick coaching upgrade. I think that there's still things that they need to figure out if they want to be a serious playoff team. And so, Logan, that's where I'll ask you, as we do every year, what do the Lakers need to do to improve? Because this is the team that we always talk about as a midseason trade candidate. Are you expecting that from them this year? And what would that look like for you?
That's it. I mean, I'm not expecting it, but that's exactly what they need to do. And I think trading D'Angelo Russell and Roy Hachimura is the biggest thing that they can do for themselves. Get another, point of attack, defensive-minded guard, a guy that can actually complement Austin Reeves. Because I'm fine with Reeves being your perimeter initiator and creator, right? Pretty unselfish. I like him out of the pick and roll. He's got mid-range touch. He can shoot off the dribble. He's got a nice floater game, right? Like, I'm fine with Reeves. And again, with LeBron and AD, no one else is actually running the show. You know what I mean? Reeves' role is still limited because those guys are going to take on so much role of running the offense. And Reeves can complement them. So you need another really efficient. It sucks, man. You know who the guy that I'm thinking of would be a perfect fit here? KCP. LA would be awesome if you had Contavious Caldwell-Pope. It would be
Just
sick.
Imagine.
I can almost picture it in my mind. Carson.
Or Logan, could you imagine Alex Caruso too?
If I really think on it, I think I could, man.
Unbelievable.
God, the Lakers are such a joke, man.
Shout out Rob Pelinka.
Shout out Rob Lowe. Man, if I wish they hadn't done those deals. But the key to them raising their playoff ceiling, because I completely agree with you, Carson. I think it's ridiculous to write off the Lakers as a team that aren't in the playoffs. And I think you said it beautifully. They went up against the Nuggets. They just ran into a team that's better, that's one of the best teams in the West. You writing off the Lakers. Basketball, football, whatever sport you want to point to, it's all matchup dependent. You can try to do these the mental gymnastics of ranking these teams every week like we do in power rankings. There's going to be logical inconsistencies because there's counters for different matchups and different teams. And it's just the Nuggets have the Lakers card. But that doesn't mean that the Lakers are a bad basketball team. And to anybody that doesn't think that the Lakers are a playoff team, do you really want to see LeBron and Anthony Davis in a first-round matchup? The Lakers are still a nightmare pull, even if they don't make any deadline moves. Like, you do not want to see that team in the first round because, as we've mentioned a bunch of times, like in a one-series, a one-game scenario, LeBron is still probably a top 3 player that I am taking in that kind of format. With the level that he was at last year in the playoffs, with the level that he was at in the Olympics, a one-game, a one-series format, the Lakers are still very scary. So I think the asset that they need to go out and acquire, Carson, a guard that is just better at the point of attack, defending on the perimeter, a real guy that can clamp up and that can shoot the basketball, because they've got their defensive hound. That's Jared Vanderbilt. You just lose so much spacing-wise offensively when you play him alongside like LeBron and AD. That lineup is just way too clunky to be a real seamless fit.
And also, is he even going to be healthy? Is
Is
he a
he
guy
going
you
to
can count on to be healthy in big moments?
100%? And I don't think Hachimura is a real good fit here in this offense. He's not a really impactful defensive player. So all you're looking for with both of these players is a 3-and-D wing or two 3-and-D wings, basically. They can just complement LeBron and AD off ball, that can defend their asses off, and they can do little things with this team. And I think they did a really good job in the draft going out and getting Dalton Connect. I think that was a huge ad for the Lakers. One of the most pro-ready guys in the draft, can shoot phenomenally off dribble, off screens. You can run actions for him where he doesn't have the ball in his hands. That's a real complimentary player to like LeBron and AD. And so he's just not that impactful defensively. So I think they went out and they got a guy that definitely helps them. They improved in the offseason. But if they really want to change their title ceiling, which, again, is the goal when you have old LeBron and you have, still in his prime Anthony Davis, the goal is to win the championship. It involves making a move at the deadline. And if the Lakers don't make that trade, I'm not going to look at them as serious contenders. Because you're right, Carson. Like, they are still a scary playoff matchup for whoever they draw, but they aren't a real deal contender yet. And so with that, do you have any specific players in mind that would be available at the deadline or guys that you think fit here?
I do. I have a couple in mind. I'm glad you brought up Connect, by the way, because I thought that he was a phenomenal pick. And I think one of the most pro-ready guys, one of the most skilled offensive players in the class, period. Arguably the best scorer at this point in the class, and also one of the most versatile and one of the most seamless off ball, which is exactly what you want playing alongside LeBron and AD in the minutes when he is playing with them, and even playing alongside more on-ball guards like Reeves and D'Lo. I just think he can produce so efficiently in a number of ways in this offense immediately. But as you say, he doesn't solve their fundamental issues. And there's a couple of those that I'm looking at. Number one, I do think that they need a backup center. I don't think Jackson Hayes is a dude who can play in the postseason. Christian Wood is going to miss at least another month from this point forward. He's had some real health trouble in his time in a Lakers jersey, and I like Christian Wood. I've always loved Christian Wood. I don't think that he brings what they need from a backup center. Realistically, I think he'd be better suited at the 4 where you get more of his offensive skill set. I think they need somebody who can defend at a much higher level from their backup 5. And I think they could maybe buy low on Robert Williams, Logan. To me, he's the first target who I'm looking at, because for Portland, Williams is never healthy, which is obviously something that is very risky for the Lakers taking him on, but it's a reality. He's your third center if you're Portland. And by the way, you have Duop Reith also as a fourth center who's legitimately solid. Like, they might as well move Time Lord. They really have no need for him with Ayton and Klingon and all the depth they have at the position. If you're the Lakers, you then bring in a switchable, high-end rim protector, athletic lob finisher, who's only got to play like 15 minutes a game for you, and hopefully there you can lessen the physical load on him so he is more likely to last a whole season. He's certainly the best talent that you're going to get on a deal that's under $12 million a year, so even with the questions about health, I think you might as well take a swing, address a position of need with a dude who is legitimately a good basketball player, and I think that they have the assets to make it happen. Tell me if you think this is crazy. If they gave up Gabe Vincent, Jalen Hood-Schifino, first-round pick last year, who, frankly, I'm not high on. I wasn't high on as a prospect, and I certainly don't think is going to be ready to contribute in this Lakers timeline. But nevertheless, a first-round pick last year for a team that is totally rebuilding in Portland, wants young talent, and then you give them the Clippers second-rounder next year, 2025, and the Lakers' own second-rounder in 2030, which could be a high second-round pick, and the Clippers' second-rounder should be mid-round this year. What do you think about that? Is that enough of a haul to make that happen for Portland?
I mean, the only reason I would consider it for the Blazers is like what you said about Robert being available. I just wonder if that's
and
enough.
And they're loaded at center.
They are. They do have a ton of depth there. I would try to squeeze the Lakers a little bit more.
You would try to get a first, or would you try to get Max Christie instead of Gabe Vincent?
I don't even know if that's enough. I still believe in Rob, the talent, as a player. Like, Rob is a disruptive defensive big man. He's really valuable. He just can't stay available. I love that trade for the Lakers. If they could get it done, I would make that deal in a heartbeat, because then you think about it. it benefits Anthony Davis and Robert Williams both because they both can just split that time up. You have 48 minutes of really good defensive center play. Davis gets to take a little break. Robert doesn't have to play the entire game because I just think at this point, I look at Williams like Mitchell Robinson, like those guys just aren't built to play that kind of, that much in a single game. You need them to be backup bigs. It's their role at this point. I'm sorry, did you give up a first in that deal initially?
2 seconds, Hood Schifino and Gabe Vincent.
I'm gonna push for, if I was the Blazers GM, I would push for a first. If the Lakers gave me the first, I would go ahead and do it. And for the Lakers, they're giving up their own first round pick, correct?
Well, they would probably give up the 2029 first, I get, but I don't know if that's worth it for them then,
because that might be really high.
They've held on to, and that could be a really high pick. And I don't know that Williams is a sure enough thing to justify that. I was trying to maybe put the squeeze on Portland a little bit, but my thought is, what is his value to Portland, right?
True.
It's zero. The only leverage that they have is, all right, we don't have urgency to trade him. We can wait, but he's not going to be a factor for them.
And considering his injury history, I think he's probably lost a little bit of value as an asset too. So, you know what? I think it is close, and I would maybe entertain it. Like you said, the Blazers' timeline isn't right, and I think the Lakers made a mistake taking Hood Schifino anyway. Like, I liked Hood Schifino and I liked Max Lewis as prospects, but they just need guys who can play ball right now. It's kind of like the Warriors dynamic with the timeline thing. It's like there's no point in holding on to a guy that's going to be good 4 years from now when you're trying to win a championship now. So if they could get it done, I would pool my assets to get Rob. I like that trade a lot.
So that's idea number one. That's position of need number one. The other path that I would love to see them take is to trade D'Angelo Russell, because they just have to improve defensively in the backcourt. You see that last year where Austin Reeves is taking on Jamal Murray and is having to exert himself so much on the defensive end and is just too physically limited to be your lead point of attack defender. And this entire team around Anthony Davis is just really flawed defensively, and LeBron James is overtasked in the regular season and ultimately just doesn't deliver in the regular season. He's still a pretty effective low man alongside AD, a secondary rim protector in the playoffs. But for this team to be a functional regular season defense, they need more athleticism. They need more defensive talent on the floor. And I think that the intuitive move there is to get rid of D'Lo, because I think that Austin Reeves is a smarter basketball player. I think that he simply understands his role offensively more, doesn't overexert himself and shoot you out of games. He is a more competitive defensive player and ultimately hasn't melted down in the postseason the way that D'Angelo Russell has, although I thought they should have held on to Reeves already, even before last year's disaster from D'Lo. The tough thing is I don't really know who wants D'Lo. His contract is pretty easy to match in terms of salary, and it's expiring, so it's not like you're taking on a problematic contract. I just don't think any good team wants him. He's not a good attitude guy. He's not a good fit in a younger locker room if you're going to try to deal him to a rebuilding team who says, we can just take on the contract, we don't care. Nor is he somebody who really plays a style that is going to be good for those younger players, because he's going to kind of want to make that the D'Lo show. And also, there's not many of those young teams, tanking teams, who just have a good two-way win-now guard hiding on their roster who they're going to be willing to give up. So I don't know that happens. I think you can look at a bigger wing like a Dorian Finney-Smith and say maybe we can pry him away from the Nets. I do think that he would be a significant defensive upgrade over Rui, but again, you're not addressing that ability to deal with the smaller guards. I think the Lakers would have to do that in an ideal world to unlock their ceiling. Didn't happen last year. Not sure it's going to happen this year at all. So then I just want to see the maximum minute stagger with Reeves and D'Lo. I really think you only need one of those offensively slanted guards on the floor at most times, and I would play Max Christie with the starters a lot. I think that he's a significantly better defender. I think he's a capable offensive player. He can knock down his open jumpers. I would just rather have a dude who is in any way in the mold of the sort of two guard that you want if you're the Lakers. And I do like Christie. I don't think he's a difference maker, but I think he's solid. So if they could address those two things, improve their center depth, get a legit two-way guard, they could be a real playoff threat, but I'm not expecting them to do both of those. I think maybe they can do one, but unfortunately the Lakers trade fantasy is often just that. And we're not talking about stars here. I don't think a star trade is happening at this point. Obviously, we saw in 2023 they were able to overhaul their roster at the deadline, and it empowered a Western Conference Finals run, but you can't do that every year. Still, though, I do think there are certain vulnerable teams that the Lakers could get in the first round. They're not going to stand a chance against OKC. They're not going to stand a chance against Denver. Probably wouldn't be able to get Dallas, although I think they would have a chance in that series because I still think that outside of Kyrie and Luka, obviously they bring in Clay, but there are some questions about the offensive consistency of that supporting cast, and just the superstar quotient for LA would be very real, could be overwhelming in that matchup. But also, I think they'd really, really struggle to defend Luka and Kyrie, and that probably outweighs it. But if they drew Minnesota, if they drew Memphis, I think they'd absolutely have a real chance. And I'd honestly probably still pick them to beat Memphis, even though I like the Grizzlies more this year, and I really like Edey's fit, and I think he's ready to contribute, just because they're so much more skilled offensively in the half court. And they're more skilled offensively in the half court than Minnesota, too. I just think Minnesota is still a damn good defense. But I could see the Lakers winning that series. The problem is they're probably not going to win enough regular season games to be in a 4 or 5 matchup where they're drawing a more vulnerable team. They're probably going to be the 6, 7, or 8 seed, and then they're going to draw one of the powerhouses, as was their fate last year, and all of this conversation will be moot because at the end of the day, they're not good enough to contend, and they probably won't play hard enough in the regular season to give themselves the best chance to win a playoff series.
I completely agree. I don't have a ton to add. I mean, I'm being optimistic about the Lakers' regular season. I have them winning 50 games,
Wow.
atop the Pacific Division. Like I said, I think the JJ Redick introduction makes a meaningful difference to me. And I'm hopeful that this team stays healthy because I agree with you. If Anthony Davis or LeBron do miss any significant time in the regular season, this could be a much closer to 500 team. And they run the risk of maybe missing the playoffs in a really, really competitive West. So, I mean, that's the dilemma. The West is really loaded too, man. Like, it is a really deep conference.
Absolutely.
There's no bum teams here. Like, everybody's trying to win. But if you think that the Lakers aren't a scary playoff draw, I still think they are. But I agree with you, man. That's probably the most likely outcome out of all these things is the Lakers will underdeliver in the regular season again. They're going to draw one of the best teams in the West, and we will be having the same conversation that we've had the last 2 off seasons where people go, the Lakers were always frauds, they were always bums, and then me and you got to come in with our swords and our shields, and we got to go, actually, guys, the Lakers weren't that bad. They just took on a team that was much better. So I think that's probably the most likely outcome.
Yeah.
I just hope, again, man, we've been making this case for 3 years running, Carson. I hope that they realize the gravity of this year. I hope they realize the importance to capitalize on the last years of this LeBron and Anthony Davis window, and they pull the trigger at or before the trade deadline to make a move to upgrade their roster and hopefully open this championship window. My final question for you.
Mm-hmm.
So if D'Lo is an expired asset, would you explore trading Austin Reeves if that was the alternative to get a more complementary player in this system, or do you think he's too good to deal away?
It would have to be a hell of a 3-and-D player. It would have to be a hell of an impact guy because I think he is a significantly better basketball player and asset than D'Angelo Russell. I would not at all be inclined to move off of Reeves. I think it has to be D'Lo who you're shopping. And the final thing with this team, as we always say, Logan, if you didn't get better in the NBA today, you got worse. And the Lakers got a little better. They upgraded their head coach. They do bring in Dalton Knecht. I'm optimistic about the development of a young guy like Max Christie being more of an actual contributor instead of being a guy who really doesn't play. You get a healthy year of Gabe Vincent. I think he's a solid rotational guard. But these are very, very marginal improvements compared to what we're seeing elsewhere. Fundamentally, until they improve defensively, until the defensive supporting cast around Anthony Davis is significantly more athletic and serious, they're going to be basically the same basketball team that they were last year. Who do you have next in this division, Logan?
I've got my Sacramento Kings at number 2 in this division, and I only have them separated by 1 game with LA. I have the Kings going 49-33. And I know a lot of people were critical about the addition of DeMar DeRozan, with concerns about spacing and defense. And don't get me wrong, those aren't ideal, I don't think it's an ideal spacing or defensive situation, but just the raw talent upgrade that DeMar DeRozan brings to this team is huge. Like switching out a bum like Harrison Barnes for DeMar DeRozan is massive. And the biggest thing that I look at is just the Kings' clutch and late game offense. You have got three guys who can just go out there and serve buckets relentlessly. That's massive when we're talking about a regular season basketball team. Well, and in a playoff context. Like, I'm not out on the Kings in the playoffs either. Having an ability to just ride the hot hand, whoever it may be, if it's De'Aaron Fox, who has been one of the most clutch players in basketball, if it's DeMar DeRozan, who has been one of the most clutch players in basketball, Malik Monk, who has grown so much. He's always a great scorer, but has grown so much as an actual ball handler and playmaker over these past few years. I want you to compare the Kings' top-end scoring and perimeter depth with, like, the Warriors or with the Clippers now that they're down Paul George. Like, the Suns, I still think, have a little bit of an edge there, obviously because they have KD and Devin Booker and also Bradley Beal. But the Kings aren't far off, and I think the Kings have an advantage over the Suns that they're going to play better defensively. They're going to play with more effort night to night that you can bank on. And it's just a weapon, man. Like, that offense is not going to stall out. This was already an elite offense with a two-man game with Sabonis and Fox, with the three-point shooting that you get from Keegan Murray, and, you know, the supplemental value that you get from Malik Monk. With three guys like this, it's just going to be hard to stop. At the end of ball games, when the Warriors' offense might stall out, when the Clippers' offense might stall out, that's not a concern to me with Sacramento. And so I trust them more in clutch and late game scenarios. And I trust them in a playoff series where they are going to be able to withstand an injury potentially to maybe one of their top scorers better than other teams. And also, again, they're just going to have guys that can go out and serve you a buckets in crucial late game scenarios. I like the Kings, man. Now, I think they have a ceiling on their team, obviously. This defense is not going to be good enough. The thing that I always harp on with the Kings long term is Domantas Sabonis at the 5. And I think Sabonis has gotten better defensively at the 5 spot. He's one of the best rebounding bigs in basketball. I got to give him credit there. Like, when you're talking raw strength, Sabonis is also just one of the strongest guys in basketball. He's a real difference maker there, but he's limited as a vertical athlete, so he's always going to be limited as a rim protector, which I think puts a hard cap on how great this defense can be. He's a little bit lumbering. And when you look at the perimeter, look, man, I like Keon Ellis. He's cool, but he's sleight-of-framed. De'Aaron Fox is not an elite perimeter defender. DeMar DeRozan is not an impactful perimeter defender. So the defense is going to be flawed. I think the defense is probably going to be worse. But I think they can supplement a little bit of that with effort and energy and hustle and rebounding. Like, this team plays hard and they play fast. So I think you're looking at a top 10 offense and probably close to a bottom 10 defense. But I still think the Kings are going to be a tough out in the playoffs. Like, I don't think this is a team that you're just going to be able to put to bed. So the spacing and the defense aren't ideal. I think that definitely puts a hard cap on if this team is a championship contender. I don't view them as one, but I view them as a team that's going to be a tough out in the playoffs and a really good regular season basketball team that's a shoe-in for the playoffs. So I like the DeMar DeRozan addition, man. I think that people kind of overblew that if you were really low on them. Again, it's not a perfect fit. It's hard finding a perfect fit in basketball, though. And the raw talent upgrade is enough for me. And they didn't give up a ton to Chicago. They got him in free agency, right? Chicago just let him walk. So I like the addition, and I think the Kings got better, man. Again, they didn't elevate themselves to being a championship contender, but I definitely think the Kings improved in this offseason.
Yeah, it's a sign and trade that ends up landing him, but you give up Harrison Barnes and Chris Duarte. That doesn't matter. You don't care about losing either of those dudes. I think the DeMar fit is okay. I do think that he makes them a better basketball team. And DeMar DeRozan has had such an interesting arc with NBA fans because he was such an exciting, aesthetically pleasing player. But then as NBA fans started to sort of wisen up to what really leads to winning, people started to be critical of, okay, well, he's not taking three-pointers with any sort of volume, and he's not a very good off-ball player, and he's a limited defender, and he wasn't a great playmaker early in his career. And everybody got super low on him. And I think that the fact that he's still an efficient scorer of the basketball in spite of his lack of three-point shooting, and that he's really grown as a playmaker and is an unbelievably efficient on-ball creator, I mean, we're talking like close to 90th percentile pick and roll and isolation both, that's kind of gotten lost. How good he still is at that specific thing. Gave you 24, 4, and 5 on 58.5% true shooting last season. Again, solid efficiency, but that's really overwhelmingly coming from an on-ball self-created shot diet. And I think that they needed a legit, consistent second scorer alongside De'Aaron Fox. It alleviates some of the burden on Sabonis to be that dude as a scorer, because I just think that we've seen Domas doesn't have the skill as a post scorer. He doesn't have the jump shot to consistently be a high-end scoring threat in these high-stakes environments. DeMar is going to be. He's going to continually serve you buckets, and I think he can have a really nice two-man game with Sabonis as well. And I don't think that DeMar will necessarily hurt their mediocre defense. When you're replacing Harrison Barnes, DeMar's obviously not going to be a plus defender. He's just not having to replace much value there at all. But the defense isn't going to improve with him, certainly. And his off-ball value isn't ideal. And the spacing that he brings isn't ideal. The good news is they do have high-volume spot-up guys around their stars. This team was third in three-point attempts last season. Keegan Murray is a sharpshooter. Keon Ellis can shoot. I think that they need him to probably ratchet up his raw three-point volume this year for the sake of their spacing. But the three-point shooting from your core stars is not ideal. And if you want to have a really high offensive ceiling, you do want that sort of three-point volume because 3 is greater than 2. So I think that DeMar makes them better, but I don't think it's a true needle mover because of still some of the clunkiness with the fit and the fact that he doesn't necessarily solve their issues in terms of defense, and he does present something new that is kind of a problem with spacing, even though he brings some of that on-ball creation that they did need. I do like Keon Ellis and Keegan Murray to round out the starting 5, though. I think when you have these sort of offensively slanted stars taking up 3 starting spots, what you need around them is to emphasize spot-up shooting and defense, and that's exactly what they've done. Keegan Murray is a stud. I'm not necessarily expecting a ton of growth from him. I think he kind of is who he is. He has a very straightforward skill set, but he's damn good at it. Just needs to keep doing his thing. And Keon, Logan, you mentioned his slight. I'm not too worried about that, though, because the assignments that he's going to be taking on to me are those smaller guards, right? The bigger wing assignments will go to Keegan. Keon is 6'5" with a 6'9" wingspan. He's quick. He hounds people defensively. He applies ball pressure. He chases you around screens. Both he and Keegan both really defend their asses off, and they have very good skill sets there. So I think that that'll make them a respectable defense, but still mediocre because of the star personnel they have alongside them. I do have a couple keys that stand out to me for both De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis this year, though, in terms of how they can elevate their play to potentially elevate the ceiling for this team. For De'Aaron Fox, I just want to see him put it all together as a jump shooter. He took a leap as a three-point shooter last year in terms of volume and efficiency, but he also dropped off 10% from mid-range, where in 2023 he was elite. So I would also like to see the 3-ball be more consistent. I'd like to see, again, a more complete, consistent jump shooting arsenal from him overall, because when you pair that with the sort of downhill pressure he exerts, I mean, you're so terrified of his speed. He stops on a dime. Those pull-up jumpers are there all day from the mid-range. The 3-ball for him can be so effective when he's knocking them down. And then for Domas, I would like to say that I want to see him become a better post scorer. He's always lower than 40th percentile in terms of post-up efficiency, which I think some people don't really know. He lacks true skill as a post scorer. He's very much a brute force player down there. But realistically, I don't know that he's improving dramatically there at this stage in his career. And I think the bigger thing is just be able to take and make shots outside of 10 feet. He made 33 mid-range jumpers last year, and he made 33 three-pointers. That's fewer than 1 shot per game made outside the paint. That's the problem. He needs to be more of a scoring threat, but mostly he just needs to be more of a spacer, especially now with DeMar DeRozan in the lineup. It's not about him taking 4 threes a game. It's about him taking 4 or 5 jump shots a game, right? Just keeping defenses honest. The 2023 playoffs was the most embarrassing instance of this, where Draymond is just playing off of him, right? Like, they're basically just ignoring him as a spacer entirely. You can't afford that. So I do think this is built to be a good regular season team, and a big reason for that is they have three of the most available stars in the NBA. Fox, DeMar, and Sabonis combined, Logan, have played 94% of all possible games over the last 2 years. That doesn't happen in the NBA these days. So that's why I have them same record as the Lakers, but I'm giving them the regular season tiebreaker because I think it's more likely that they have the better record just because those dudes are always on the floor and they're deep, pretty deep. You have Herter coming off the bench. Of course, you have my Lord and Savior, Malik Monk, who is an absolute god and one of the greatest sixth men we've seen in the history of this sport and got that much better last year. The playmaking, Logan, to pair with the dynamic scoring. It's so much fun. That means that they're going to rack up a good amount of regular season wins. In terms of playoff upside, they have more creation than last year with DeMar. They're objectively better. I still can't see them winning a series in the West. I do think they'll struggle to defend these high-end Western Conference offenses. Two very good one-on-one wing defenders can't make an entire defense, especially when you have a clear liability at center. Domas plays hard defensively. God bless him. He just doesn't have the athletic traits needed to be a solid starting defensive center. I worry a little bit about size and physicality with this team. I think that they can kind of get bullied in those categories. And I do still worry about Sabonis being a consistent offensive player like he is in the regular season, in the postseason. DeMar does alleviate some of the burden on him there as a scorer, but he's been underwhelming. He's been disappointing in the playoff series we saw and then in the play-in last year. So they're going to win regular season games. They have a very clear ceiling still, in my opinion, and ultimately the DeMar trade doesn't move the needle on that. It doesn't really change my outlook in terms of that ceiling.
No, it doesn't, and I think Sabonis is the biggest culprit. I'm glad you said that. I mean, every offseason I see highlight tapes of Sabonis, banging corner threes, hitting threes above the break, like training, practice, right? Like it's just him, open gym, catch and shoot, working on his game. It has yet to translate, and it's really disappointing. It's the final component of what would, I think, make Sabonis I'd respect him. I guess I'll say it like that. Like, I would respect Sabonis if he could hit a jump shot. Like, if he did that, I wouldn't have any more, I would put him in my top 10 definitively. I would.
Top 10 centers, you're saying?
Correct. There just wouldn't be any holes or exploiting him.
He should already be in there because you had Miles Turner in there, which was insane. But I'll say it like this. He'd be the player that most Kings fans say he is. Because he goes on these dominant stretches of regular season production where he's racking up triple-doubles and his efficiency is off the wall. If he could just pair that sort of playmaking from the five and that dominant rebounding and that simple play finishing with the ability to space the floor, then that would be like a fringe top 20 player in basketball, which right now I don't think he is.
He'd be the MVP player that Kendrick Perkins thinks he is, man.
Jesus Christ, yeah. I don't know about that, but still.
And I think the fit is going to work, and Sabonis does complementary things that I like handoffs. I think him and DeMar are going to have a really fun time running offense with each other. The same way that you see it with Monk and Fox. Like, that is a really tough action to stop. Absolutely. Just a handoff or Sabonis dotting players. But you bring up the 23 playoffs against the Warriors, and that is what always has left a sour taste in my mouth. When Sabonis is matched up with a center that is slighter framed than him, that is small, that cannot bully him, Sabonis eats. But when Sabonis is matched up with a big Zoo, for example, or a Kevon Looney, like we saw in the Warriors matchup, he can't bully those guys the way he can smaller centers, and so he struggles. Him spacing the floor would be the great equalizer because, one, that's just a weapon in itself, being a 40 to 50% shooter from mid-range and three-point land, but also, like you said, it would just force defenses to respect him.
Yeah.
And where they couldn't play off the paint. And that is what scares you in a playoff scenario where, one, Sabonis isn't stretching the floor and defenses can load up in the paint, which limits Fox's, Monk's, and DeMar DeRozan's effectiveness, and he's not making them pay for it. It would make it clunky. It would make it clogged up. And so, I think that is the biggest limiter of this team, man, is Sabonis' limitations as an offensive player. That's been my big gripe with him. I want the Kings to win a title. I don't just want them to be competitive. I know for a while they were in the cellar, right? The longest playoff drought in basketball for the longest time. And so they've exercised those demons. The next step is figuring out how you put this team into championship contention. And I still think Sabonis is the biggest limiter to that recipe. But I'm glad you brought up Keegan Murray and Keon Ellis, man. I just want to give those guys a shout out. Keegan Murray is one of the best 3-and-D wings, I think, in basketball,
Absolutely.
man. I think he's undervalued. Like, it's a very simple skill set. You're playing defense at a high level and you're hitting a high percentage of your threes, but that's one of the most valuable skill sets in basketball. And then Keon's just a dog, man. That guy is a pest. I will never forget that game against we keep talking about Warriors Kings. I will never forget that game where he went off against Golden State, man, hitting all those big threes, playing elite defense on Steph Curry. Like, Keon's a dog, and I think he brings more versatility than a guy like Kevin Huerter, and Herter's going to be out, I think, for a little bit. And Herter's an elite shooter, but I think I would rather have in this sort of lineup, I know Huerter brings elite floor spacing. I would much rather have a guy that brings complementary things defensively and can shoot, brings a little secondary ball handling than just a straight-up spot-up guy like Huerter. So I think the Kings are going to be better this year, but not by much. And I still think their fundamental issues are still the fundamental issues that have plagued them in the past.
I completely agree on Keon being an upgrade over Herter and a much better fit with this starting five. I think that the defense would be pretty disastrous if you tried to try out this starting five with Herter in there at the 2. I feel like some people will probably be concerned about DeMar come playoff time because that was another part of what damaged his reputation so much, that he was just a horrible playoff underperformer. Call me crazy, dude. I just think that DeMar's a better offensive player than he was in Toronto. And
He's gotten so much better. He's gotten so much better.
A significantly better playmaker is really the biggest difference. And I do think that his shot diet isn't conventional, but he eats up free throws. He's knocked down from the mid-range. He still gets to the rim at a pretty good rate. I think that DeMar is a dude who you can bank on offensively to do his job at a really high level in the postseason. So they have that going for them. They have 3 legitimate stars, and De'Aaron Fox is a dude, man, and he can go toe-to-toe with some of these elite players, but it's still a lot to ask over a full series, right? Most of these other teams in the West have more of a genuine 1A.
The one thing I wanted to add on Fox was just I've mentioned this on the show before last year during the season, but over the past 2 years, with his improvement in three-point shooting, the one thing I want to see from Fox is just him continuing to exert himself down. I was about to say downfield, but just getting downhill, right?
Yeah.
Like, Fox is special in that he's basically unstoppable getting downhill because of how fast he is. And you'll just see when his three-pointer is on, Fox will lull himself into just taking more threes. And he'll kind of X out the thing that makes him the special player that he is. And I want him to strike that balance more. I'm not saying X out threes. I'm not saying X out mid-range shots totally. I'm not saying, stop going to the rim. I just want him to find the nice balance between all those shots where he's still maximizing his efficiency. Also, breaking news, the Kings just signed Doug McDermott, so I think they're a shoo-in to win the chip this year.
Dougie McBug's going to save the day. I'm with you completely on the Fox point, relying on the jump shot. I talk about him needing to be a more consistent jump shooter, wanting to see that out of him. But I think that's a great point. It's a very common thing that happens to players as they get older, like even once you're into your mid-20s like he is now. But he's such a special downhill threat, and he's such a special finisher at the rim. And you just look at his rim frequency. 2020, 31% of his shots were coming inside 3 feet. That number's down to 13% last year, by far a career low. I'm with you. We talked about that last year. Want to make sure that he is still exerting himself to the utmost extent in that way, because that is his most special trait. The roller coaster of an NFL season is moving right along, and it promises to be a month full of tricks, treats, and of course, touchdowns. And DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, is the #1 place to bet touchdowns.
Running it in from the 1 or an 80-yard bomb, we don't care how they score touchdowns. We want to bet on them. DraftKings heard us and is delivering. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple, like a player to score a touchdown. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your pick.
Here's a reason for new customers to do a touchdown dance of their own. Bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code NERDS. That's code NERDS for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. So we have the same top two teams in terms of regular season record in this division. There's another team, though, that I'm higher on for the playoffs than I am the Kings. I wonder if you feel the same. Who's next for you in this division?
Phoenix.
I am higher on Phoenix.
Is that what you're alluding to?
The Kings. Yeah.
I think that makes a lot of sense, man. I think that makes a lot of sense. They're really similar. Like, they're defensively flawed. They've got, a great offensive trio throwing a haymaker. Yeah, and that's my biggest question about Phoenix, and I think you've seen it in the preseason a little bit too. Can the Suns commit to playing winning basketball with maximum effort? And what I mean by that is just committing to playing defense, committing to grabbing boards. It's going to be hard to overcome the personnel limitations overall when you have a guy like Yusuf Nurkic who's limited as an athlete at the 5, who can't defend in space, when it looks like they're going to start Bradley Beal at the 3. So they're limited personnel-wise, but it's more about avoiding complete defensive breakdowns. And what I mean by that is just general miscommunications, hustling your ass off. And this is always going to be difficult with a team with personnel limitations, but also with such a brand new roster, right? I think that gets overlooked a bit today in the talent-rich NBA, right? We always talk about guys' skill sets and what they can do. A thing that I think just gets consistently overlooked is the chemistry aspect of basketball, where guys just have played together for so long, where, I don't know, it's like I worked in a restaurant for a really long time, and you just get good at recognizing what your coworkers are bad at and how you can pick up for them on the shift. And it goes like that for basketball, too. You just get more familiar with, all right, well, this guy's not going to crash. I need to crash the board. You're just going to get familiar with your role and what your responsibilities are. And so I think we're probably going to see some more growing pains with that from Phoenix. I think that was a big issue last year with all the moving parts and pieces in this roster. And it's probably going to be a big part of their struggles on that end this year. I mean, the longest tenured Suns right now, Carson, as teammates, Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Josh Okogie, and Damian Lee from the 2023 season. Nobody else has played together, again, longer than since 2023. That's not a long time to gel together. But I do like the personnel a little bit more defensively on that side of the ball than last year. I like the introduction of Ryan Dunn. I think specifically when you're looking at this team and what they need don't need more scoring or offensive punch. That's what you're getting from KD, from Book, from Beal. Obviously, the other guys are going to need to pull their weight and make shots in big games to win, but you need guys who can complement them more, and Dunn is an elite perimeter defender. Athletically, what he can do protecting the rim, defending in space, defending the pick and roll, he's an elite defender at UVA. The issue was the shot, and I'm encouraged by what we've seen in preseason. 44% on nearly 7 attempts per game. It seems like that's been a real focal point for him. If his shot is solid, I might start Ryan Dunn, man. He might be my 6th man.
Oh, dude. Let me tell you something. I think Ryan Dunn is the most important player for the Suns' hopes this season.
Wow. Really?
I do. You want me to get into my full Ryan Dunn take, dude?
I actually would love that.
I'm not even joking. I legitimately think that my thoughts on the Phoenix Suns in a lot of ways hinge on what Ryan Dunn is for this basketball team. My expectation was that you were basically looking at an Andre Robertson or a Matisse Thybulle, right? A special defensive player, all defense caliber, but inept offensively. And it's not a one-to-one comparison, right? He is a more explosive athlete, and he brings some value as a cutter. And I think he's a more special defensive talent, especially because of what he does as a rim-protecting wing. But ultimately, elite defender, disaster offensively. That's what he looked like at Virginia. That's what I thought they would be getting this season. But he looks extremely confident as a catch and shooter, Logan. You mentioned the efficiency is one thing. That's great, making 44% of his threes. The big thing is the volume. He is jacking them up. I mean, not like forcing it, right? But just whenever he has an open look at a catch and shoot 3, he is letting it fire. And if he can shoot enough of those at a decent volume just to keep defenses honest, and he makes 35% of them, Logan. That's all that I'm saying, right? Because this dude was a non-shooter last season. That is huge, because if he is a capable offensive player, He brings exactly what this team is missing. He's 6'7" with a 7'2" wingspan. He's a super quick lateral mover. He's got suffocating length. Like, this dude smothers jump shooters. He's an awesome perimeter defender. And he's a really good vertical athlete. He's an elite rim protecting wing. He led the ACC in blocks as a wing. He averaged 2.3 blocks per game. And he's just everywhere. He flies around defensively. He's a good low man. He's locked in on rotations. He gets in passing lanes. He's just a disruptor. And all of last year, the Suns desperately needed two-way role players, Logan. That's all they were looking for, specifically defensive role players. But you can't really play a defensively oriented guy big minutes if he's incapable offensively. Dunn could be that for them. And I do think that their best five includes him because he adds size, he adds athleticism, he adds defense in a huge way, and he eliminates some of the skill set redundancies here. Ultimately, I don't want to be overly reactive to the postseason that we've seen from him offensively, but I don't think we are. I think this is clearly a dramatically improved jump shooter, right? You don't go from not taking threes and making only 20% of those that you do to putting up 7-8 a game and making 44% of them like it's preseason, but that doesn't happen, right? Preseason isn't that fake. So I'm extremely encouraged by that. My question is just, are they going to play a rookie the sort of minutes that I think they should when they promised Tyus Jones a starting job? Correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like I remember Bradley Beal saying something along the lines of fuck coming off the bench when he was asked about that. That's a problem then, because I just don't like the Tyus Beal, Book, Katie, Nurk starting five. I think that is guaranteed to be a defensive disaster. You tell me you're trotting out a Beal, Tyus Jones backcourt with Yusuf Nurkic at center, you're going to be a terrible defense. So we can talk about some of the offensive improvements on the margins that we've seen in preseason and that you would bet on with this personnel. And okay, that's one thing. But if this team's going to turn around, it has to be defensively. It has to be athletically. Ryan Dunn is the only dude on this roster who can do that.
So let me ask you this then. What is their ideal starting five to you? Who would you trot out if you were the coach?
I mean, I would not be starting...
I'd move Beal to the bench. That would be my play. And, I know Beal wouldn't like that, but I think it makes the most sense in staggering minutes with your stars. I really like Tyus Jones and what I think he can do for this offense. And, yeah, I think that defense is just too – they're going to get eaten alive. There's no athleticism. There's no size. There's no rebounding.
Yeah.
KD is your best defender, and that's not a jab. KD is a good defender at this point in his career. I think he can really defend – 4s and 5s at a high level, but he's the only real plus defender in your starting five.
Yeah, right. He still brings some of that good secondary rim protection. He's a solid plus defender, but can't be an anchor for you defensively. Can't save a unit, certainly. So I think you're probably right, dude. Obviously, I think that Bradley Beal is a better basketball player than Tyus, but I think you have the skill set redundancies with him and Book and KD. I'd still play Beal good minutes. I'm just trying to find the most complementary lineup combinations. And I want to be clear, they're certainly not starting Ryan Dunn early in this year. They don't necessarily have to start him, but they have to play in big minutes, and they have to play in big minutes with a mostly starting configuration, and ideally in doing so stagger Beal's minutes more with the bench unit.
Yeah, and specifically in looking at his role on this team with the starting five, last year, the fatal flaw of the Suns was that they couldn't hit corner threes, right? Okogie and Royce O'Neal are just clinging. Ryan Dunn's job would be to sit in the corner, space the floor, and just hit open shots that come to him and then defend his ass off at the other level. It's a really simple role. And like you said, man, I think you justify him playing him big minutes if he's over 35% a night. He just brings way too much.
I don't think he has to be over 35%. I think if he's 33%, I'm talking about just keep the defense honest.
Mm-hmm.
He is such a monster defensively, dude. This is the best defensive prospect in the class.
Yes, I agree.
And the reason that he fell all the way to 28 is because he was the worst offensive player drafted in the first round, no question. If he is capable, and I think that he has decent feel, and again, he's a good athlete, so he brings some cutting. if he's capable as a shooter, that's a difference-making basketball player.
And I mean, I think he can be a problem in transition too, man. I love the way he gets up and down the floor.
Yeah.
I like it a lot. I also like the other additions that the Suns made in the offseason, though. I think they did a good job building out the rest of this team and the bench. I love the addition of Tyus Jones for this offense. He's a true point guard, which is Carson has broken down many times, is a code for he can't score, but that's okay. Tyus Jones doesn't need to score the basketball. He's got guys who can do it for him, but he's fundamentally unselfish, and that's what I thought the entire time with Phoenix, is there's no guy on the court, and I don't think you need a guy like that is just making good decisions. I think you can get away without having a true point guard, quote-unquote, but there was nobody who was looking to play make. There was nobody with like a point guard's vision or brain or decision making. Tyus does that. He is just so fundamentally unselfish. The stat that everybody throws around, he has led the NBA in assist-to-turnover ratio 6 straight seasons. He set the single-season assist-to-turnover ratio mark. He's just a great decision maker, and he is looking to create advantages, whether that's on ball by himself or just making the unselfish pass. I think Tyus Jones changes a dynamic that the Suns offense needed. Just a guy who's going to make the good decisions, who's going to move the ball and not screw it up and not make boneheaded plays where Bradley Beal's trying to push in transition, where Eric Gordon wants to go ISO mode and do too much. And then around him, I like the other moves on the margins, man. I like the acquisition of Mason Plumlee off the bench. I think that was some much-needed big depth. I like Monte Morris, right? I think he brings, you just didn't have a ton of point guard depth here. It's not super game-changing to me. Like, I don't think the Suns are near, like, the top championship contenders to me. To me, that's still Oklahoma City and Denver. But, like, when I look at a team like Minnesota, for example, right? I think that's a good example because these teams faced off in the first round last year. I think it's closer, much closer between those two teams than it was last year. And again, a part of that component is Minnesota getting worse, obviously, by acquiring Julius Randle. But I think they're much closer to that. Let me ask you this. Do you think the Suns, I know you said that you view them in a different way than last year. Do they have the best playoff chances to you out of this division, even more so than the Lakers?
No. I still prefer the Lakers because I think the Lakers have the best offense in this division, and I still think they have the personnel to have a better defense than what I'm expecting the Suns to do. And I think the AD LeBron quotient, as great as KD and Book are, they don't reach that level of dominance, especially because of the physical aspect of it and the two-way aspect of it and the rim pressure aspect of it. That makes me lean LA. There's a world, and it's a world that rests on Ryan Dunn's shoulders, I'm not even joking, in which I could see myself liking the Suns more. The thing is just like, am I going to bet on that going as well as possible and him being utilized as much as possible? No, I'm not going to bet on that. So I can see a ceiling with this team that I didn't last year when I picked them to lose in the first round. Felt like they were going to be a first-round exit for most of the year. But it's really about the dimension that Dunn could add to this team defensively. The offense does look a little better, and they're moving the ball in preseason. And Tyus does bring that selflessness, and he just had a career shooting season. He was 42% from deep on almost 3 catch-and-shoot threes per game, which I think is important to him having value here because he's not always going to be the dude with the ball in his hands, right? I mean, you have Book and KD and Beal, and yes, those guys can kill you off ball. They also have the ball a lot. So to be a functional part of this offense, you have to be able to knock down catch-and-shoot jumpers. Tyus Jones has improved there significantly. And I understand wanting more of an organized offensive identity here. Somebody who can run actions for you, get your elite scores going in their spots. I do think that that will help a little. I also think the value of the quote-unquote pure point guard in this offense has been a bit overstated. I think you can have an elite offense with KD and Devin Booker as your foundation and primarily off-ball players around them. Like, the problem to me at the core of this offense wasn't the lack of a true point guard. Their real problems to me were their complete lack of rim pressure and their lack of volume three-point attempts. They're 28th in restricted area attempts. They're 25th in three-point attempts. They have fundamentally redundant star players in Beal and Book and KD, none of whom are high-volume three-point shooters, none of whom are even close to high volume rim pressures, Tyus Jones doesn't wipe that away. Going from Grayson Allen to Tyus Jones in your starting five also, you lose three-point shooting. You lose the best spot-up shooting that you did have, even though Tyus has improved there. He's no Grayson Allen, and there's just such a lack of athleticism here. Allowing an athletic, physical defense like Minnesota to pressure and bully them, that is what grinded this offense to a halt last year. They just couldn't even get into their stuff because they were overwhelmed athletically. They didn't address that with Tyus Jones. And at center, they still have a non-floor spacer and an unathletic big. You're not getting vertical spacing. You're not getting actual floor spacing. That's not a good formula. That's just not somebody who you want to be your starting center, period, especially when you consider the defensive problems that Nurk has. So without fixing those issues, I just don't see them becoming an elite offense. They were 10th in offensive rating last year. They could jump a couple spots this year because I think the Tyus makes them a little better. Again, I think he addresses something with this offense. But there's a lot more that went wrong than I think a lot of people made it out to be. And that's where I'm still not sold on this team. And I think the starting five is going to be a disaster defensively. Like, you're just getting smaller, worse defensively, going from Grayson Allen to Tyus Jones. Nurk obviously is going to limit your defensive ceiling significantly. They were inconsistent with their defensive buy-in all of last year. I don't really think that that's going to change. And everybody focuses on the offense because this is such an offensively oriented team. They had a defensive rating of 123 against the Wolves, man. That was their real problem. They got bullied. Their offense absolutely was stalled early in that series. They exploded in game 4, though. Exploded. Book and KD were unbelievable. What happened? They still got beat pretty soundly because they couldn't get stops because bigger, stronger, more athletic teams punch them in the mouth, destroy them on the glass, take their soul. And Tyus Jones doesn't change any of that.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't change those things, and Anthony Edwards killed them, knocked down every pull-up jump shot, knocked down every three, was getting to the rim at will. No, I don't think the defense fundamentally changes, but I do think this offense is going to be a lot more organized in the fourth quarter of games. That what was so staggering last year is that the Suns were just so dysfunctional and unorganized in the clutch, like routinely, boneheaded turnovers in transition. Like, I'm talking about stuff that you would see in a JV basketball game, right? That's why I couldn't stand watching those games in high school, man. I had to wait around for varsity. Watching turnovers in transition, dude, it's so frustrating, man. Or like, and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, but you see it in a lot of WNBA games where you're like, damn, man, you can't even get the ball to the other side of the floor. And that was happening to the Suns in big moments in the fourth quarters of games where Eric Gordon, like I mentioned, man, trying to overexert himself and pulling 24-foot threes in transition where it's like, bro, pass the freaking – you're Eric Gordon, man. Pass the ball or get downhill. Like, I do think Tyus will keep this team a little bit more collected, calm, composed, and he gives them just a baseline where you're not going to have these disasters and collapses in the fourth quarters the way that the Suns were last year, because they were legitimately one of the worst fourth quarter offenses in the NBA last year, which is just something that can't happen when you have this much star power. The ideal scenario for me for Phoenix, we're talking about what the Kings can do, what the Lakers can do, what the Suns can do. An ideal scenario is you find some chump that would be willing to take on Bradley Beal's $50 million contract, which would free up more playing time for Tyus Jones and Ryan Dunn, who I think are more complementary players to your actual star tandem in KD and Devin Booker. And the other alternative would be finding, an athletic rim-protecting, rim-running big man that could, play instead of Yusuf Nurkic, where you could move him. Unfortunately, those are really valuable archetypes that are not easily obtained. And who the hell wants Bradley Beal at $50 million a year? Nobody. Right. So, I just think that's out of the window. I think the Suns for me
at any price. I mean, he's only making $18 million a year for the next 2 years, but he'd have to go to a tanking team.
He's spoiled goods.
Unfortunately, there's no Daniel Gafford to pillage from the Wizards again this year.
Yep.
Right? You can't just find those players automatically on bad teams who will take on a bad player of yours on a bad contract.
He's spoiled goods at this point, man. So Yeah, I think the Suns are behind Minnesota for me still. I think they would, in my world, I think they would get overwhelmed physically again. I just think that team's big and strong and defensive
Logan,
oriented.
they allowed an offensive rebound on 40% of possessions in that
To
series
Minnesota?
to Minnesota.
That's crazy.
40%. And now you have 6'1" Tyus Jones in your starting lineup. Like, the starting five doesn't work. And unfortunately, it ultimately discourages me about where the Suns are headed. Because you say bye-bye Frank Vogel, you bring in Bud. Okay, you made a change there. You brought in more of a true point guard, Logan. And I don't disagree that he does bring some value in organizing this offense more and, again, getting guys in their spots and all that. But it's like, if you're going to get tougher, you got to get serious. You have to get serious about changing the things that went wrong for you last year. And to me, simultaneously starting Tyus Jones and Bradley Beal shows that you aren't doing that. You're still worried about these interpersonal politics and, keeping your best players' egos nice and fed instead of doing what has to be done to win the most basketball games possible.
So, I mean, you think there's just a disconnect between the management and the team and actually how to win basketball games?
I don't know that it's a disconnect between management and the players. I think it's just a problem with this team. I don't think that this team fundamentally understands where they fell short last year. And I'm not sure that a lot of people understand where they fundamentally fell short last year, because I feel like I'm seeing a lot of people all aboard the Suns train again. And while I think they'll be a little better, I'm not seeing a team that's dramatically changed unless Ryan Dunn, my boy, comes through, in which case that would be fun. And then legitimately, I think, okay, this team could win a playoff series. You had that sort of athlete and defender. He pans out. That could happen. But unless that does happen, then this feels like a first-round exit again. And even if Ryan Dunn does pan out, like, I don't know if I'd pick the Suns to win a playoff series because the West is really good.
Still could definitely be the case. I agree with you. I think they got a little bit better. And so I like their playoff prospects a slight bit more than last year, but I have this team finishing with a 48-34 record, winning one less game than they did last year. It's not a meaningful difference to me. And like you said, dude, their flaws are still their major flaws. This is an undersized, unathletic. They're not the Suns aren't serious. The Suns aren't serious.
Yeah. Bradley Beal, man. We've talked about this before, but everybody looks at that deal and criticizes them after the fact. Here's what I'll say. They were trying to make the most of a shitty situation. There really was no good answer. Their contending window had kind of closed with the regression of Chris Paul. It had closed, and they've just been fighting to keep it open ever since. And even with Devin Booker and Kevin Durant on your roster, it's just tough to do when they had to deplete their resources to get KD. And then CP3 and Ayton's value both plummeted. Like the 2021 Finals team deteriorated very quickly, and it put the Suns, just big picture, in a very difficult spot. These last two teams, Logan, you could also argue are both in difficult spots, sort of caught in no man's land, both of them. Warriors, Clippers, who's next for you in the Pacific Division?
I've got the Clippers next in the Pacific Division, and I think that these teams' championship window is officially closed as well. And I think the big reason why the Clippers didn't want to re-sign Paul George is they just felt like their window was done. I think this team still wants to be competitive, but I think they realize with Kawhi's injury history, there's just no real opportunity for them to actually win a championship. And I feel the same way. So I don't blame them for not bringing back Paul George. I don't think this team had a championship ceiling. Kawhi's just never going to be healthy enough. I think the Kawhi ship has sailed, and we can start there. It's like, it breaks my heart, man. Kawhi Leonard is at his peak as one of the greatest basketball players I've ever watched, man. It is a mastery of the game. The way he weaponized his strength and could get downhill, the off-the-dribble shooting, the three-point shooting, the everything, the defense. He was a total freaking package. That's a long time ago, man. It's like 5 or 6 years now. Like, that version of Kawhi Leonard. And his knees just can't hold up. It's sad. It really is sad. And so the Clippers, I think, are still going to be a good regular season team, even without PG. I've been very, very, very critical of James Harden in the past, but I think he really is a good regular season stabilizer. I think Harden can make your offense pretty good. He's a good passer. He can still have his flashes of games where he's knocking down shots off the dribble. And don't get me wrong, it's going to be frustrating. There's going to be a 2-week stretch where he's not missing off the dribble. He's hitting every mid-range jumper, every step-back three, giving you, 25 points a night, over 10 assists, and you can be like, damn, man, Harden's real good. And then he's going to give you another stretch where he gives you 15 points a night on, with 9 assists a game where he's not hitting those shots. It's just the James Harden that we know and hate at this point in his career. So Harden is a good regular season stabilizer. And the 40 to 50 games that you're going to get out of Kawhi Leonard are going to be damn good, because when Kawhi is available, he's one of the best players on planet Earth. You can still say that. Like, God, man, I love watching Kawhi when he's out there, Carson. Like, he's still a special player. But they lost their third star. And so the championship ceiling is gone here. But I do like the depth. Like, I think the drop-off, they're going to drop off. But it's not going to be, super significant, I think, in terms of, like, we're not going to see this team drop out of the playoff picture completely. I don't think we're going to watch this team, just fall off the map and be, at the bottom of the West. I still think they're going to be very competitive. Like, flanking them in the starting five, Norman Powell, Terrence Mann, I think bring complementary skill sets. I think Zubats is one of the best, not one of the best big men in the league, but I think he's one of the most underrated big men in the league. An elite post scorer, great rebound. He's massive. He's just huge. Like, what he brings rebounding, rim protection-wise, screening, the, post game, it's really, really valuable. And I like some of the guys they brought in the offseason, Derrick Jones Jr. I think Kai Jones is going to have a role on this team, man, with what he can bring athletically.
That'd be an all-time resurgence for one of my draft takes. I really liked Kai Jones.
Yeah, dude, I hope so.
I don't see it, unfortunately.
I think he'll get rotation minutes here. I think he'll be moderately effective.
I hope he can stay on the floor and doesn't go insane.
Yeah. That'll be better than in Charlotte, man. Charlotte's just a hellhole.
For sure. I think that there's something in the water, like, legitimately.
Oh, it's called drugs.
Mercury.
It's called drugs. They're in the city of Charlotte.
Yeah. I think that they've experienced, like, a scarecrow poisoning Gotham sort of situation with the water.
I think it's more of like
Charlotte.
a Percocet and opioid epidemic.
Right.
But
a bit
that's
more on the nose. Yes.
But that's a good comp. That's a good comp. Basically, I don't think the Clippers are going to fall off a cliff in the regular season. I still think this is a good regular season team. They'll be an above-average offense, fringe top 10 to top 10, and they'll be a below-league average defense. But they don't have a prayer at winning the title. I think this is probably a play-in team in the West, and to get out of the play-in, they're going to need healthy Kawhi. Healthy Kawhi doesn't exist. Healthy Kawhi is a myth.
Yeah, very, very sad. But very true. I'm lower on the Clippers than you, Logan. Part of that is I have an extra bad feeling about Kawhi's health this season. And I hate to base predictions on that, but he couldn't finish last season, obviously, which isn't a surprise. He hasn't been able to finish the last 4 seasons. But he couldn't play in the Olympics. He's been ruled out for the entirety of the preseason. I understand they're always going to be careful with his body, but this is an extended pattern of, okay, Kawhi's just not quite ready to go yet. And we've seen that before, and it's generally a harbinger of bad things to come. I hope I'm wrong, but I think it's more reasonable to expect him to miss 30, 40 games than 14 games like he did last year. And Logan, the West this year is insane. I think you can argue it's the deepest conference that we've ever seen. And it's very possible that there are 12 legitimately good teams this year. It's possible. Has it ever happened before, though? No. And so if we're just betting and thinking critically, somebody's got to fall off. It might just be due to injury luck, like it was with Memphis last year. I think the Clippers are the single most likely team to be the victim of that, because without Kawhi on the floor, I think that things kind of fall apart for this team. And by the way, even Kawhi and Harden on the floor together last year without Paul George on the floor had a negative 1.6 net rating in over 350 minutes. So PG tied together a lot on this team with his defensive versatility, with his elite spot-up shooting, with his still extremely efficient on-ball creation. Like, PG was a monster in the regular season last year, and they lose a lot without him. I do still think their offense can be pretty awesome, because Harden is still a really good regular season offensive engine, as you mentioned. I think he can ramp up his scoring volume a bit from what it was last year to consume some of those PG touches. And he was an 87th percentile pick and roll creator and an 86th percentile isolation creator. Like, he still gets you really good shots in the regular season. And Kawhi is a top 8 player when he's on the floor. Still an unstoppable scorer, on and off ball, ridiculously efficient, gets where he wants physically, unbelievable shooter, pulling up and off the catch, and a really good defender. But we're talking about the offense. Norman Powell brings you great shooting. He's athletic. Terrence Mann's a solid offensive player. And Zoo, as you mentioned, super underrated, legitimately good offensive center. Best touch shot maker in basketball in terms of those push shots and hooks in the paint. Outside of Nikola Jokic, his efficiency is consistently unbelievable there. So it's a really good offensive team. The problem is I think they're going to be a well below average defense, probably a bad defense, because they were 17th in defensive rating last year. You go from Paul George to Norman Powell in that starting five. Now you're small. Your defensive backcourt sucks. You're going to struggle more to rebound. And your best defender, Kawhi, is old and is going to be unavailable for some stretch of the year. We don't know exactly how much, but we know it's going to be some portion of the year. With Kawhi not on the floor, I mean, I think that this is a horrible defensive group. And I think that their bench is pretty mid. Like, I do like Derrick Jones Jr. I like Nick Batum. Those are solid pickups. Kevin Porter Jr., unfortunately, is a solid dude to fill that bench ball handler role, right? He's more skilled probably than your average dude in that spot. Terrible person, but he'll be fine at that. But outside of that, I don't know. Amir Coffey, Chris Dunn, they're okay. Dunn had a good season, still a bad offensive player. Mo Bamba, not a great backup center. Bones Highland had a rough season. I'm not really sure where he fits in this year. I definitely think they have the potential to be like a 45, 46 win team at full health, because I think they can be a really good offense and a mediocre defense with Kawhi on the floor. I would still say below average, but I just think Kawhi goes down and things fall apart. They've been below 500 without him in his time there, and this is the weakest supporting cast they've had. You don't have a Paul George to pick up the slack anymore. Without him on the floor, I think the defense falls off a cliff. I think Harden has to carry a really heavy burden as a creator. You put shooting around him and Zubats at the 5, you'll still have solid offensive results, but not what you would with Kawhi out there. So I have them winning just 38 games. I do think somebody in the West, out of all these teams, has to be the odd team out. I think it's probably them. And if they do make the playoffs, I don't think they have the defensive ceiling to win a series in this Western Conference. Bro, his head on his hands reflecting.
Wow.
You're shocked? You're gobsmacked?
Do you have them last in this division? Oh, don't get me wrong, dude.
I do.
I didn't know who the hell to pick because I did my numbers, right? Because you got to have an even record at the end of this when we're doing our predictions. So I tallied it up. I was so happy with what I had been doing in all of our previews coming into this. I was like 16 games under. And I was like, oh, yeah, man, I'm about to deal out some fat wins to all these teams in the Pacific Division. And then I deal them all out. And then I'm like 20 wins over 500, and I had to reel it back in.
Yeah.
So I've adjusted, actually, some of my Eastern Conference predictions. I've adjusted.
I'm going to do that, too. I'm going to
some
have to
teams
knock them down a couple. Yeah.
But just by 1 or 2 wins. So they're going to be slightly different than what I said in the previews. But I had to do that here. I ended up putting the Warriors at the bottom of this division just because I like the Clippers' depth more. And I only have them separated by 1 game. I have every team in this division at 500 or above, so it's tough. I have them winning 42 games. We'll get to the Warriors in a second, and I hate counting Steph Curry out, but I just do like the Clippers' depth a little more. But you make a strong case, man. If this is the year where Kawhi's injury really bites them, where he misses more than half of the season, I can see this going really downhill, really fast. And I hate doing this, and I hate being like super negative too, but you look at this Clippers era now that it's like fully closed, and I know we had this conversation when PG signed with the Sixers, but it really is a massive letdown. All the first-round picks and draft capital you gave up to Oklahoma City to acquire Paul George, and you give up the crown jewel in that deal, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's a top 5 player on the planet today, unequivocally. you just look back and you have to be disappointed. All you have to show for it is one Western Conference Finals appearance. It's a really, really sad end to a sad era in Clippers history, man.
Yeah, there's no question that this is a very disappointing outcome for this era, and they've left themselves in this spot where obviously they were much too invested in the win now window to bail on it and recoup assets that were anything comparable to what they gave up to build it in the first place. So it was never going to be like, oh, we can hard launch into a rebuild, right? Kawhi doesn't have that sort of value on the open market. And they were ultimately just better off seeing what can we do on the off chance that we're healthy while still making the most of this window, while still trying to keep our fan base engaged as we're introducing a new arena. That's been the story of the last couple years for the Clippers. It's been preying on the best possible scenario for the win now window, because that's the only window that they really have had any chance of banking on. And now that PG's gone, they really don't. Now they're just going to hope to be a solid competitive basketball team that has a pretty healthy Kawhi Leonard and James Harden and keeps the fan base engaged because they're solid. I will say, I have the Clippers so low, winning just 38 games, because I'm anticipating, unfortunately, some bad health luck with Kawhi Leonard. But even in a vacuum, presuming health for both these teams, I do like the Warriors a little bit more this year, I think. So I do have them winning actually a handful more games than the Clippers. Why are the Warriors last in this division for you?
They just didn't improve by enough to me, man. I still think that their burden on Steph Curry is just massive. Like, barring another offensive leap from Jonathan Kuminga, there's just no other star that can alleviate this pressure off of Steph Curry. They needed to add another star shot creator. There's no creation around Steph. Like, I like the bench pieces they added, man. I think they did a good job addressing the depth and filling out this roster. There's just nobody I trust around Steph. And I hate doubting Steph. I want to get that out of the way early, man. I mentioned that when we were talking about the Clippers. Like, it seems like every time you doubt Steph, he comes back stronger, right? People were down on him after he got hurt. Warriors end up winning the title, right? People have gotten really low on him after the ending of last season when, the last 20 games or so, the athletic regression, the less rim pressure, and then he goes and, does what he always does in the Olympics. Steph is still one of the best players, I think, in the NBA, and so this is like not an attack on him. I just think that there's such a burden for him to be so great offensively every night. It's like your quarterback in football, man. It reminds me a lot of the Bills, Carson, your Buffalo Bills. If Josh Allen plays a bad game, the Bills are going to lose. There's no margin around him. If Steph Curry has a bad game, the Warriors are going to lose. There's no, margin around him. And so that's where I come down. Like, I like them getting Buddy Hield, but Buddy Hield is going to fill in the Klay Thompson role. And he'll probably be better than Klay was the past couple of years, because I think that Klay has just gotten worse, and I think that Buddy is still an elite shooter of the basketball. But
You think he'll be better than Klay?
Klay was bad last year. Yeah, I think he'll be better than Klay.
I think he'll take less bad, frustrating shots.
True.
He's
Maybe
a very
that's yeah.
special shooter. I think that's kind of
Yeah,
the
man.
only advantage that he'll have is not having those just like frustrating, settle down, don't shoot us out of this stretch of the game kind of moments. I also think he's going to be in a smaller role. Like, he's not going to start. I don't think he's going to start.
Yeah, no, I think they're going to start B-Pod.
Yeah.
The Warriors are just a small team, right? They're probably trotting out a lineup with Kuminga at the 4, Draymond at the 5. They're not super athletic, and they're limited offensively, So I like the depth pieces that they added. I like getting Buddy Hield. I like getting DeAnthony Melton. I like getting Kyle Anderson. Those are really good additions to me. But this is a small, unathletic team that is just too reliant on Steph Curry. I think they're very similar to last season. So barring a bounce back from Andrew Wiggins to form, barring another leap from Jonathan Kuminga, who I think Kuminga's special. Like, his athletic traits, his ability to get downhill. I don't know if I see like a star ceiling with Kuminga, but I think he's going to be a good number 3 or a number 2 one day on a good team. I don't know if I believe in the shot as much as some people do, but I mean, he's such a physical outlier that I think he's going to impact games. I think he's going to be really good defensively, rebounding, once he puts it all together, and I think he's going to be a freight train coming downhill. He already is that, but Yeah, I view the Warriors really similar to last year, and I think this burden just continues to get bigger and bigger on Steph Curry's shoulders, man. Again, small, unathletic, really dependent on Draymond defensively, really dependent on Steph offensively. I don't like the formula. So I actually have the Warriors finishing. I lied. I said every team was above 500 or above. I have them right below 500 at 40 and 42.
I am a little bit higher on them. I do like the depth additions that they made in the offseason. Buddy is legitimately one of the best pure three-point shooters ever. Volume, efficiency, it's just undeniable. He'll be a decent rotation piece. I'm not expecting too much from Buddy Hield. I still would definitely rather have Clay on my basketball team. I don't think that the Warriors should have retained Clay, to be clear. I don't think that they should have paid him. I'm just saying I think he's better because he's still bigger. He's even more special off movement, although they're both really tremendous there. And Clay does still have a really good feel for moving without the ball in a way that is rare. And he's still a more capable defender than Buddy. But the Clay era had to end in Golden State after how last year went for him, ended for him, but people overreact to just the 0-10 elimination game. It was a really rough year for Clay. So, Buddy, solid rotation piece. Kyle Anderson can defend. He can be a connector on offense. He's a solid vet to have on this bench. My favorite is DeAnthony Melton because he's legitimately good. He's super long, good athlete, very active defender, deflection machine, and a good shooter and a capable creator and playmaker on offense. So just a nice plug-and-play complementary guard who does several things at a pretty good level. But big picture, what happened for this team? You missed out on Lauri Markkanen. You missed out on Paul George. You missed out on any opportunity to get meaningfully, significantly better and reopen not even a title window, but the window to being a 50-win team, right? To winning a playoff series, having a puncher's chance at winning a second playoff series. You had to add really one of those two stars who would have not just been great basketball players, but fit so ideally, and you didn't do that. So now here you are. You're in NBA purgatory, basically, with Steph Curry, who will drag you to being a competitive, solid basketball team no matter what, but you haven't put a team around him that does him justice, because you thought that the dynasty could go on forever and you could have two timelines, and you didn't understand that it doesn't work that way. And guys like James Wiseman, who, by the way, just wasn't good, but even guys like Jonathan Kuminga don't contribute immediately to teams that have title aspirations. All those picks should have been traded. They should have gotten Pascal Siakam. They should have gotten OG Anunoby. We've been over this time and again. It's just infuriating. And although the Warriors window went on for a very long time in the scheme of things, the fact that they could be a serious playoff team, not necessarily a title contender, even if they had done those things at this stage, but a more serious playoff team, if they really understood how these things work, that's always going to be frustrating me. And it's just stupid. It was stupid mismanagement by Bob Myers. But now working with this reality, not having been able to make any of those splashy moves, you need the young guys to take a step up fast. And I think a lot of this season is about Brandon Podziemski and Jonathan Kuminga. I'm really excited to see Pods as a starter. I just think he's fundamentally a better basketball player than Klay Thompson in this situation at this time. Just a winning player. Has a nose for the ball, elite positional rebounder, really good shooter of the basketball, insane shooting prospect in college, very selfless, crafty passer, competes hard defensively. Just really a pretty ideal guard complement to Steph Curry because he does so many different things for you. And the Dubs were way better with him on the floor accordingly. They were 9 points per 100 possessions better with him out there. When Steph and Clay shared the floor together, the Warriors actually had a negative 1.5 net rating. They were outscored by opposing teams. When Steph and Pods shared the floor together, they had a +4 net rating. They were legitimately good. So I definitely expect him to be a better starting guard alongside Steph than Clay was this past year. The question with Pods is, how can he grow as a creator? Because that's the thing that we've been talking about the Warriors needing over these last few years. Somebody who can really threaten the defense with the ball in their hands. And I think that Pods has some chops there, but he doesn't separate a ton in isolation situations. He's got amazing touch. His floater game in college was ridiculous. He's got a beautiful step back, super efficient on step back jumpers last year, and he's crafty. So he has the skill, but because of his athletic limitations, he doesn't get anything easy. And this team needs him to take a step forward in that role. I'm generally optimistic with Pods because I think he's a really good all-around basketball player. But when people talk about him having a star ceiling, which people do, and I think some of that is maybe just inherent Warriors inflation, Warriors optimism, that self-created offense is what holds me back. I think that he's solid there. I don't view him as a true number 2 in that role, but I think he'll have a good season. I mean, I think this dude could give you like 15, 7, 6 on solid efficiency, shooting close to 40% from deep while playing very solid defense. I don't think it's at all unreasonable. In fact, Logan, personally, I expect us to view him, not Jonathan Kuminga, as this team's third best player, because I do think he is a more refined winning basketball player already at this stage in his career, because I do have more questions about Kuminga. No question that he is a special athlete, among the handful of best athletes on the planet, and he's great in transition because of that. And he was already a 73rd percentile pick and roll scorer and an 80th percentile isolation scorer last year because he's tough to cover on an island, even in the half court. He's got the speed, he's got the power, he's got the bounce, and he's got the body control to just find his way to the bucket as a driver. I mean, a Jonathan Kuminga spin is a tough thing to stop. But outside of that one aspect of his game, that athleticism and that transition scoring and that self-created on-ball scoring purely, I just don't think he gets it. I think that there is so much about his game that needs to be significantly improved upon and refined. I'll give you an example just because I was watching the Lakers preseason game last night, just the first quarter. There's so many moments where you just think the feel, the basketball IQ, the all-around impact isn't there. He totally forecasts the pass that D'Angelo Russell jumps for an easy steal and transition bucket the other way. Defensively, there's just so many mental errors. He lets a big get right to the bucket in transition without getting a body on him. He takes a dumb gamble on a steal on a LeBron post-up and just gives him a runway to the rim. Totally bites on an Austin Reeves pump fake to allow some easy dribble penetration for him, and then he feeds Anthony Davis on a lob. Like, his defense is still clearly below average despite his athleticism, and his playmaking is bad. He can get himself a bucket. He can't create for others, and his shot is still pretty bad. It's not something that I trust, and his feel is still pretty bad, and his shot selection when you ask him to take on a significant load, like in the play-in game, right? It's, okay, we need Jonathan Kuminga to be our number 2. What does he do? He's taking a bunch of mid-range pull-ups, right? Just not the shots that he can be taking for you if you want him to be an efficient, functional offensive number 2. I don't see a true building block in Jonathan Kuminga, nor do I see somebody who works right now as theoretically a lot of people are saying your second option. Everybody throws out the comparison of Jaylen Brown. They just say Jonathan Kuminga is going to be the next Jaylen Brown. In his second year, Jaylen Brown took 4.5 threes a game, made 40% of them, and was 10th in Defensive Player of the Year voting. He immediately embraced developing the very aspects of his game where Kuminga is still falling short, and the very aspects of his game that make him an impactful win-now player and raise his long-term ceiling, that being shooting and defense. And we just haven't seen any of that from Kuminga. So he's very talented, and he's very young. I'm not saying he can't be a star, but I personally wouldn't bet on it. I think everything on the periphery of his game needs real work, and I definitely don't think it's going to happen this year. So I'm lower on Kuminga. I do see the special traits, but I see a lot to worry about alongside that.
So, I mean, in saying that, do you still think the Warriors should trade Kuminga? I mean, this is the eternal
Not
question,
gonna happen.
Carson.
It's not going to happen at this point. It's over. It's over. It's not going to happen. It's
They're
too
just
late.
waiting. They're going down with the ship.
I think that they're really high on Kuminga, and I get it because he's a dude who you look at and you say, okay, there is star upside there. It should have happened a long time ago, man. I understand if you don't want to ship away a valuable young asset at this point. For what? First of all, who's the star going to be? You couldn't pry Lowry away. You couldn't make sign and trade happen for Paul George. And there's not a title ceiling that's going to be reopened for this team. So at this point, it's not me still reaming the Warriors for inaction in the 2024-25 season. It's about inaction 3 years ago. It's about inaction 4 years ago. That's what's put them in this position there's no chance they trade Kuminga. I mean, they wouldn't include Podziemski in the marketing deal. And although I really like Pods, I think most people would definitely view Kuminga as the shinier asset, and they wouldn't even include Pods. And I don't blame them, because it was a pretty massive haul that the Jazz wanted, and it's frustrating because Lowry would be such a great fit here, and they had to choose a direction, and they haven't. But at this point, it's kind of like your ship is sunk, and you just throw your hands up in the air and you say, okay, we're a middling basketball team. They're not going to trade Steph Curry, even if in terms of objective basketball outcomes, that would be the best for both parties. He's a person. He has a life in the Bay Area. He doesn't want to move. As an organization, they can't do that to him if he doesn't want to be traded. So here they are. They stand pat. They sit on their hands, and they're going to be an okay basketball team. I've accepted that. I've been extremely frustrated with how they've handled the last few years. Mismanaged assets, mismanaged timelines. Now you sort of just have to come to like a Zen understanding that it is what it is. The window is closed. There isn't that magical trade that can be made anymore. I shouldn't say magical, because the trades were real. They just didn't make them. And it is what it is.
It's a slow, sad death, man. The Warriors are bleeding out right in front of us.
But that being said, I think they can be a little better than they were last year. Does that really matter? No, but it's something. Be a little rejuvenating. I don't know. You do it with some young guys, it could be a little more fun than it was with Clay being miserable last year.
Looking outside of the young guys that you're looking for improvement for, I want to key in on a couple other guys real quick before we get out of here. One, what do you think about Steph and the regression angle that everybody's been pushing after the end of his last season?
I would broadly say don't underestimate the power of Steph Curry. I know that he struggled post All-Star game. He was 23 a night on 57% true shooting. I still think he's a top 10 player. I just think that usage, that weight that was on his shoulders every night wore him down eventually. And I'm not saying it's going to be that much better this year, because they still fundamentally lack that second high-end shot creator alongside him. But he's still so ridiculously impactful, dude. The Warriors were 43 and 31 when Steph played last year. They were 3 and 5 without him. They were still an 82nd percentile offense with him on the floor. So are you getting tier 1 play out of Steph at this stage? Are you getting top 5-ish play? No, he's firmly in that back end of the top 10, but he is still that. He's still one of the most transformative offensive players we've ever seen. It's just getting to the rim less than ever before. Not the same athlete and defender. Didn't have a great passing season, creating for others last season. But I don't think that we're seeing like the downfall of Steph Curry whatsoever. I still think that he's a top 10 player in this league. I am a little bit concerned about him missing more time this year, though, because he only missed 8 games last year, and he's typically been good to miss closer to 20 in recent years. And if that happens, that's no good for this team. Since 2021, they're 27 and 34 without him. And I think that we would see similar struggles this year. I think they would be comfortably below 500 teams in games that Steph isn't on the floor, and that could hurt their hopes to make the play-in or playoffs.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I've got one more follow-up for you on the Dubs, because I know they're your squad. Are you optimistic at all about a bounce-back season for Andrew Wiggins or Kevon Looney at all?
No. Looney, I think, hardly figures into the picture for the team at all. And Wiggins, I just think we kind of have to accept that 2022 was a fairy tale run from him. I don't know. We've seen 2 years now of significant regression from him. He played at an unbelievable level defensively in that run. But he hasn't shown that level of commitment to the defensive end. He hasn't shown that level of focus, effort. Offensively, I think that we know what he is. He's a middling shooter who's not going to make the most of his athleticism and who's a bad playmaker. I'm not optimistic on those fronts. But what I will say is, I think that the roster around those guys has made some improvements because of the depth, because of the progression of the young guys. And I think one of the most interesting questions for this team is, what's their starting 5 this year? I'll just ask you, what do you expect to see from that starting group? Who do you think is on the starting lineup day one?
I think it depends on the matchup. If I'm facing a bigger team, I'm probably running TJD at the 5, and then I'll run Draymond at the 4. Kuminga at the 3. We'll bring Wiggins off the bench, and then B-Pod and Curry. And then against smaller teams where I'm not worried about athleticism as much, I'm probably trotting out Dre at the 5, Wiggins at the 3, Kuminga at the 4, or vice versa. Wiggins at the 4, Kuminga at the 3. I don't think it makes a difference. He'll be on the wings. And then B-Pod and Steph. Yeah, I think that's what I'd probably go with. But, I do like the bench considerably more than they've got a good bench group like Melton, Heald, TJD, Kyle Anderson off the bench. That's a stout group, man. That's a solid group off the bench where I feel like all those guys could be spot starters on other teams.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I agree. I feel similarly, and that's part of the reason that I think this team is a little better than last year, although I have them winning fewer games just because I think everybody's better in the West. I think we're going to see multiple combinations in the starting 5 for sure, but I think they probably land on, as the default, Steph, Pods, Wiggins, Kuminga, Dre. I think that they probably lean all the way in to the small ball for the most part. The Warriors last year actually had a +7 net rating in over 1,000 minutes with Dre at the 5, and they really excelled offensively in those looks, and that to me is the biggest thing. The spacing has just been so brutal in the front court in recent years when you're starting Kuminga, Dre, and a big, or you're starting Wiggins, who's been less consistent as a shooter, Dre, and a big. It's just really taxing on your offense. And this is definitely the best group for that, for your offense, for your spacing, for your skill, your athleticism on the perimeter, and it's just their 5 best players. So I'm good with them trying that because it's not ideal to have Draymond as your center, but also it's not ideal to have to play him alongside a offensively limited center with a questionable shooting 3 alongside those guys. They're going to be horrible rebounding in those groups because Dre is a bad rebounding 5, Kuminga's a bad rebounding 4, Wiggins is a below average rebounding 3. Shout out to Pods. He'd have to make up a lot of ground for everybody else in that group. But overall, I think that that's probably their best look, and it just gets their best players on the floor. But I would be very willing to go with TJD as a starter, and this is where people will disagree with me. I would probably be inclined to bring Kuminga off the bench before Wiggins, even though I'm not expecting a Wiggins bounce back, just because he's still a significantly better defender and he's still a significantly better shooter. And I think that's what that lineup requires. And then you can have Kuminga bring that offensive punch off the bench. I don't know if that'll happen. I don't know if Kuminga's going to come off the bench at all in year 4. Frankly, I doubt it. But I think that that's probably the better look when they do go with Draymond and a big out there. And I like TJD. I think he brings vertical spacing, right? He brings short roll playmaking. He's a good passer. He's a good athlete. He allows Draymond to be that secondary rim protector, which is where he's at his best. He's going to make you much better on the glass. I want to see a lot of TJD either way, whether he is starting or whether he is coming off the bench, because he's the legitimate big on this roster who should be playing. It's not Kevon Looney. So I think we'll see multiple things. And I like this roster. Like, I expect Pods and TJD to get better. I like the veteran depth adds. But they didn't really solve any of their fundamental issues. Secondary shot creation didn't solve unless Pods and Kuminga take leaps, like real leaps. Even if those guys both improve by a good bit, they're not stacking up to number 2 options around the league this year. Size, getting bullied by some of these bigger Western Conference front courts, well, if anything, I think it makes sense for them to lean into the opposite and just try to beat teams with small ball. Go throwback style. It's harder to do in such a massive West, but they certainly didn't improve by adding a big forward, a power forward, like maybe we would have hoped that they did. And the front court spacing and offensive skill could still be very suspect, really, in looks where they do have a traditional center on the floor, but across all looks, I think that the shooting in the front court is not going to be good. So those are the concerns. But again, Steph's going to carry you to be a good offense, whether you can believe it or not, when he's on the floor. And Draymond, we should not underestimate. Like, I think that he regressed a bit as a rim protector last year. I think he took a little step back athletically. The numbers reflected that. He's still easily a top 10 defender on the planet. He's still a genius, probably the smartest defender on the planet, and he's everywhere. And they were an 82nd percentile defense with him on the floor. So those are still two of the better anchors, two of the best anchors on their respective side of the floor that we have in basketball. Steph on offense, Draymond on defense. But they are lacking high-end talent around them, and they're banking a lot on dudes who are still figuring things out and getting better. So my expectation is that they make the play-in and miss the playoffs. I think they're scrappy. I think they're more fun than last year. I think the vibes are better. I'm excited to see more of the young guys, but they're just fighting an uphill battle in terms of talent against some of these loaded teams out west.
All right, my final question to you before we actually get out of here.
Okay.
What is Jonathan Kuminga's ultimate ceiling to you? Like, how great could he be among, like, he's a top, at his apex, whenever he reaches his peak, he's a top what player in the NBA?
What do I think is his ceiling, or what peak do I expect him to reach?
What do you expect him to reach?
It's honestly hard to say. I think it hinges on a few of the key swing traits that we're talking about, like just basic spot up shooting, like just engaging more defensively. And he's still young there, so I won't count it out. But, you know, he plays on a serious team with a serious defensive identity, and he hasn't progressed like I would like to see on that end. I think there's a world in which Kuminga doesn't get much meaningfully better than what he is today, because he just has to embrace other aspects. He can't get any better athletically, right? Like, that's already the trait that is carrying his game at this stage in his career. I do expect him to get better in the peripheral aspects of his game, though. I think he'll probably be a fringe top 50 guy at his best. I don't expect him to become the sort of all-around dude who it's like, okay, he's an offensive focal point for us, and I don't see him embracing the defensive side of the ball to the fullest extent. And he's wonky to find a fit for right now. If you're a non-shooter and a non-defender, even if you're a really good athlete, that's not somebody who I want on my team. So he has to get better in those areas. I expect him to get a bit better, but I don't expect him to max out his potential. I think Jaylen Brown is an extremely optimistic outlook, because that's basically best case scenario in both of those areas, right? Not to say that Jaylen Brown is the best shooter and best defender, but like with where Kuminga's at, if he could become that level on both sides of the ball, that would be an amazing, amazing development success, and doesn't happen all the time. That's why Jaylen Brown, even though he was the third pick in the draft, is such an impressive testament to the Celtics player development, because they took such a raw athlete and they made him such a good all-around basketball player. That doesn't just happen on average.
Well, I feel like his trajectory has just been stronger too than Kuminga's. I feel like he gave you stronger indicators, in his early years.
So I'm saying, dude, second year, he already had down the two categories that would just make him a winning player. And then he started to add the star stuff. Whereas it's like with Kuminga, yes, you have the one star trait that pops immediately, but everything around that hasn't been developed close to how it was with Jaylen. What do you think? What do you expect him to reach?
I don't trust the shot. I do think he'll eventually figure it out defensively. Like, he's just so great of an athlete. I do think that if so much of defense is, and I know that everybody says it, but it's true. So much of defense is literally just effort, engagement, and IQ. Positioning, knowing where to be, and playing your hardest. So I think he can figure it out defensively, and he has those traits that make him special. But I think you're in the right range. I think top 50 is good, and I don't know, man. If you're comparing him to Jaylen Brown, I just think that's so optimistic. Like, Jaylen Brown is a special basketball player. Like, he just won Finals MVP, for Christ's sake. Like, come on, man. Where would you put like a guy like Jalen Johnson already? Do you think Jalen Johnson's already top 50?
Probably just outside of that. I'd have to think, but no, I don't think he's top 50 at this moment, although I love Jalen Johnson. I would rather have Jalen Johnson than Jonathan Kuminga. I'll tell you that. I think both these guys are still getting better, but I think Jalen Johnson's already embraced the defensive side of the ball, and he's a significantly better playmaker, and he's a significantly better shooter, which he wasn't coming in. He actually has developed that, and he's not knocked down, but he's solid, right? I certainly trust him more than Kuminga as a spot-up player. So he's doing all the peripheral stuff on top of being a really good athlete. That's the difference. That's why I would take Jalen Johnson. Kuminga's a more special athlete for sure, and is already better at getting himself a bucket, but everything else I would take Jalen Johnson. But no, I don't think either of them are top 50 players off the top of my head at this moment. Although I think Kuminga's going to be in ESPN's top 50 because he wasn't in the 51 to 100. I don't know, man. Do you think they're going to undersell or oversell the young Warriors developing player? I think they're going to oversell him. But also Jalen Johnson wasn't in there, and I do think Jalen Johnson's definitely a top 100 player, but he's not top 50. The more I think about it, he's probably around 75. Like, the league is stacked, but then they're going to have, like, DeJounte in the top 50. The ESPN list is garbage. I'd rather have Jalen Johnson than DeJounte Murray every day of the week.
Same. That's, I don't know, man. I really hope they don't put Kuminga in the top. I think that would be crazy.
Honestly, dude, I'm tempted to make my own list. Because sometimes it's hard for me to have in perspective. Like, until I see these dudes, like, I see Herb Jones 97 and Jonas Valanciunas 91. I go, okay, that's obviously wrong. But I don't necessarily always have a perfect perspective in my head. Like, I know, like, the top 40, I have a sense of, okay, I think that guy is in whatever range within the top 40. But after that, I'm generally just like, that guy's good. You know, I could get more specific in my thinking probably. So
if you were to do this,
time you throw a question like that at me.
If you were to do this, would you base it off of like the asset, kind of like how Bill Simmons does, like the trade hierarchy, or would you do it more as guys you'd want for to win a basketball game?
I do it for this season.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah, I think that makes more sense.
Derek Lively, 56, for example. I see that.
Maybe do a Nerd Sesh special, man. I would love to do an episode like that, but Jesus Christ, the way we talk, it would probably go 6 hours, man.
Top 100? Yeah, I don't know. We would have to pick, like, a handful of things that we really
might fit better as like
on.
a rapid fire TikTok or something, man, with a bunch of flashing images or something.
100 though, it's so many dudes. It's so many dudes, but it would be fun. It would be fun to rank. I don't know. We'll see. Perhaps a project for another time. For now, though, Jalen Johnson's not top 50. Jonathan Kuminga's not top 50. We'll see if they can get there. God bless them. All right, guys. Appreciate you tuning in. One more division to go in our previews. Then we're on to awards and playoff predictions. So very excited for that. If you missed all of our NFL content over the weekend and reacting to the Devontae Adams and Amari Cooper trades, you can catch up with all that on our YouTube channel across audio platforms, where, of course, we also have all of our NBA shows if, again, you want to catch up on the season preview content we've done up to this point. If you want more Nerd Sesh, you can follow us across social, TikTok and Instagram at Nerd Sesh, Twitter at Nerd_Sesh to see clips from the show, to see graphics from the show, and above all else, to see our short-form trivia content and just some of the quicker thoughts that we have. Sometimes something doesn't justify a whole conversation on a pod, so we just make a little TikTok. Like I did that, actually, reacting to the ESPN ranked number 100 to 51. So that's across our social pages. And you can join our Discord if you want. The link to that is at the link tree across our social media bios. So with that, as always, appreciate you guys. I've been Carson Brabber.
I have been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.